Take a deep breath and look around. You are sitting in this room, reading these words on a complex device, illuminated by energy, on a chair made from countless materials. Everything around you, from the grain of rice in your bowl to the computer on your desk, is the result of a massive, intricate chain of resource allocation. And here's the deeply unsettling fact that triggers a powerful, uncomfortable emotion called righteous anger. Sometimes, everything is terribly wasteful. Have you ever been enraged seeing piles of fresh produce discarded at the market while people go hungry? Have you ever felt helpless knowing your company is wasting millions on a convoluted process while your salary remains stagnant? This isn't just a random injustice. It is a system failure. It is a personalized fear that turns out to be a shared human anxiety. We have everything we need, but we don't know how to use it optimally. Deep down, we always believe there must be a way to arrange everything perfectly so that no one has to endure unnecessary scarcity again. If we have X units of labor, Y units of raw materials, and Z units of machinery, there must be a secret formula to generate the maximum possible output, right? The 20th century, with its two world wars and the clash of two colossal economic systems, central planning versus free markets, turned this question into a philosophical and existential battle. Could the central brain calculate everything, or was the invisible hand the ultimate commander? What if I told you that even the free market system we revere is often trapped in wasteful mistakes no less egregious than those of central planning, and that the Nobel Prize-winning geniuses had to delve into pure mathematics to find the cure for that waste?
The Nobel Prize in Economics, or more accurately the Spherisch-Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel, has a fascinating backstory. It is not an original Nobel Prize, established later in 1968, and it has become a strange bridge connecting mathematics, psychology, and economics. In the 1970s, one of the most symbolic awards was given to two thinkers seemingly from two opposing universes, Leonid Kantorovich, Soviet Union, and Chelling Koopmans, USA/Netherlands, in 1975 for their major contributions to the theory of optimal resource allocation. This was more than just an award. It was a cinematic moment in the history of thought. Koopmans, a Dutch-born economist working in the US, studied how resources, like cargo ships, factories, are used most efficiently in a market economy. His work was an attempt to understand and quantify Pareto efficiency, a state where no one can be made better off without making someone else worse off. Essentially, he was searching for perfection in a decentralized system. Kantorovich, a brilliant Soviet mathematician, approached the problem from a completely different angle. How do you make central planning work? He observed that Soviet factories and farms were constantly paralyzed by nonsensical shortages or surpluses of resources. He developed a revolutionary mathematical tool called linear programming. Linear programming is a tool that helps find the best way, the optimum, to achieve an objective, maximize profit, minimize cost, given certain constraints, labor hours, amount of raw material. If you are a factory manager who needs to produce A and B, but only has X machine hours and Y tons of steel, Kantorovich's tool will tell you the exact quantities of A and B to make to use up all resources without waste. But the most miraculous and dramatic thing was not the tool itself, but what both men from opposing sides discovered: shadow prices. And that is the hidden truth about the nature of the prices we see every day. In the central planning system, prices were often arbitrarily fixed by the state. In the free market, prices are the result of supply and demand. But Koopmans and Kantorovich, through their mathematical tools, independently discovered that for a system to be truly optimal, every resource, an hour of labor, a ton of steel, must have an intrinsic value, a shadow price. The shadow price provides the ultimate intellectual satisfaction when we grasp it is the maximum increase in output value you can get from having one extra unit of that resource. If you are producing A and B and are constrained by machine hours, the shadow price of an additional machine hour tells you exactly how much more profit you would gain. If the shadow price of steel is zero, it means you have too much steel, waste, and having more won't increase production. Koopmans realized these shadow prices in a free market were precisely the equilibrium prices if the market were perfect. Kantorovich realized these shadow prices were what Soviet planners must use if they truly wanted their system to be efficient, instead of the arbitrary prices they were using. The bitter truth. Both geniuses pointed out that, for things to work optimally, you need a perfect price signaling system that reflects true scarcity. While Kantorovich struggled with Soviet politicians who tried to reject the notion of prices because it resembled capitalism too much, Koopmans had to grapple with the idea that his free market was too far from that perfection. And how does this relate to your life? Every time you see housing prices soar despite numerous empty apartments, it is evidence that the shadow price, the true value of a square meter of land in that location, and the market price are completely misaligned due to barriers and regulations. Every time you see a business pour money into a non-profitable project, it's because they are not accounting for the shadow price, opportunity cost, of the resources they are using. This work is not just mathematics. It is the measurement of societal waste, the very thing that makes us righteously angry every day.
If the biggest problem of waste is that shadow prices are not honestly revealed, how can we design a system to force people to reveal their true value? This is where the second major theme emerges, driven by fatalism towards market chaos: mechanism design. This work is a direct extension of the question posed by Kantorovich and Koopmans, but it shifts from calculating allocation to creating the rules. Think about game theory, the tool for analyzing strategic interactions. Pioneers like John Nash showed us how people will act in an existing game. But what if you are the one who creates the game itself? This is where Nobel laureates like Leonid Hurwitz, Eric Maskin, and Roger Myerson step in. They created a new field called mechanism design, often dubbed the reverse engineering of economics. Intuitive example: intellectual superiority. If you want to sell a cake and want the buyer to pay the highest price they are willing to pay, optimizing resource for the seller, you could ask them directly, but they will lie. They will say, "I'm only willing to pay $5," when they are actually willing to pay $10. Mechanism design is about creating a rule of the game where the buyer is best off telling the truth, their $10 valuation, rather than lying. The Vickrey auction mechanism is a classic example, where the winner pays the second highest bidder's price. This mechanism encourages participants to bid their true valuation because bidding above the true valuation would be foolish, and bidding lower would only increase the risk of losing at a price you were willing to pay. These men didn't just get a Nobel Prize because they understood markets. They got it because they showed how to construct a market from scratch. They are the architects of honesty and efficiency. Mechanism design is not just about blackboard problems. It has been applied in life and death situations. More recent Nobel laureates like Paul Milgram and Robert Wilson applied auction theory and mechanism design to engineer complex auctions for radio spectrum, where telecommunications companies compete for the right to use frequency bands. Why is it important? The spectrum is a scarce resource, like Kantorovich's steel and machine hours. If allocation is done poorly, large companies could hoard spectrum they don't use, or small companies could be unfairly shut out. The consequence? Your mobile service is worse and more expensive. Milgram and Wilson designed auction rules that accounted for complexity. The value of one band depends on which adjacent bands you own, complementarity. Their work helped the U.S. government raise billions of dollars efficiently and ensured the resource was allocated to those who would use it most effectively. Human story. Wilson is known as a quiet, introverted mentor, while Milgram is a brilliant theoretician. They worked together for decades, with their symbolic collaboration reinforcing the idea that economics is a social science built on interdisciplinary cooperation.
Even though mechanism architects can design a perfect game, real life always has an element that makes waste persistent: asymmetric information. This is the third major theme, where our fatalism and personalized fear reach a peak. We fear being cheated. Nobel laureates George Akerlof, Michael Spence, and Joseph Stiglitz revealed a cruel and profound truth. In most important transactions in life, one party always knows more than the other. Classic example:
Akerlof analyzed the used car market, the market for lemons. The seller knows if their car is good, peach, or bad, lemon. The buyer cannot know. Because the buyer cannot distinguish, they will only be willing to pay an average price between good and bad cars. This creates a vicious circle. Good car sellers will never sell their car at the too low average price, and they will withdraw from the market. Eventually, the market is flooded with bad cars, lemons. This is called adverse selection. Why is it important? This is why you feel anxious when buying insurance. You fear the insurance company will deceive you, or when you try to hire a new plumber. Spence's work on signaling explains why people go to university. The degree is not necessarily for the knowledge learned, but a signal sent to the employer. I am a hardworking person, intelligent enough, and capable of completing tasks. And Stiglitz studied screening, where the less informed party tries to create mechanisms to sort the other party. For example, an insurance company offers different contract types to force high-risk customers to screen themselves by choosing a contract with a higher deductible. The link to waste? Asymmetric information is the #1 cause of social resource waste, as it paralyzes markets, forcing resources to remain idle, like the good car withdrawn from the market, and leading to suboptimal transactions.
If we accept that prices are imperfect, Koopman's Kontravich, and that markets are paralyzed by dishonesty and informational asymmetry, Hurwitz and Akerlof, the biggest mystery remains. Why do human beings act so irrationally? The entirety of classical economic theory is built on the foundation of Homo economicus, a perfectly rational consumer who always maximizes their utility flawlessly. Yet we, the flesh and blood consumers, know that is absurd. We buy things we don't need, panic sell stocks when the market is down, and constantly promise diets will break in 3 days. This is where we need validation. Our emotions and irrationality are logical and predictable. This is the field that Nobel laureates like Daniel Kahneman and Richard Thaler brought to the mainstream, behavioral economics. They weren't just economists. They were psychologists who crossed boundaries to prove that emotions are part of the model, not an error term. Daniel Kahneman, an Israeli-born psychologist, is the only non-economist to win the Nobel Prize in Economics, 2002. With his late collaborator Amos Tversky, he developed prospect theory. Prospect theory was a genuine shock offering validation for people's biases. It explains that, 1, we fear losses more than we desire gains. The pain of losing $100 is stronger than the joy of gaining $100. This explains why you hold on to a losing stock for too long, fear of realizing the loss, or why marketing strategies often focus on don't miss out rather than gain more. 2, we evaluate probabilities poorly. We overweight rare events, plane crashes, and underweight frequent events, car accidents. Human story. The collaboration between Kahneman and Tversky is described as one of science's greatest partnerships, a perfect complementary fusion of two entirely different minds, working tirelessly during long walks and extended conversations. Kahneman showed us how we act, but Richard Thaler showed us that we can be nudged to act better, and that is a revolutionary truth. Richard Thaler, Nobel 2017, took Kahneman's insights and turned them into practical policy. His work offers intellectual satisfaction as we realize that our irrationality doesn't have to be our fate. Thaler introduced ideas such as mental accounting. We don't treat every dollar the same. We have entertainment budgets, savings budgets. This is why you don't mind spending $20 on a restaurant meal, but struggle to spend $20 on a useful app. Endowment effect. We value things we already possess more highly. This is why selling an old house is emotionally difficult. Thaler's greatness lies in the concept of the nudge, a choice architecture technique that encourages people to make better decisions without restricting their freedom of choice. Example, modern parallel. Improve retirement savings rates by making the default for employees to be opted into the savings plan rather than requiring them to opt in, leveraging human inertia. Encourage healthier eating by placing healthy options at eye level in the cafeteria, using visual bias. The link to waste. Waste is not only caused by inefficient markets, it is also caused by us wasting our own future through irrational decisions. Thaler provided a tool to fight against that personal waste, restoring our optimization, but through a psychological path, not a mathematical one.
No Nobel economics story is complete without mentioning a cinematic ideological clash, Eugene Fama versus Robert Shiller. This is a magnificent opposition, representing two investing and economic philosophies. Eugene Fama, Nobel 2013, the father of the efficient market hypothesis, EMH. Core idea. Fama believes stock prices instantly reflect all public and even private information. According to him, you cannot consistently beat the market because the price is already the best reflection of Koopman's internal shadow price. Fatalism. This leads to the fatalistic acceptance that trying to find undervalued stocks is a waste of time. Robert Shiller, Nobel 2013, a leading researcher on market bubbles. Core idea. Shiller argues that human irrational behavior, Kahneman and Thaler's emotions, leads to over-optimism and over-pessimism, pushing asset prices, stocks, housing, up and down in bubbles far beyond their fundamental value. Righteous anger. He successfully predicted the dot-com bubble and the 2008 housing crisis. His work is a sobering call and sometimes an object of anger when seeing the financial market waste social wealth purely due to greed and fear. Both won the Nobel Prize in the same year. This is a rare moment where the Nobel Committee didn't choose a side but awarded both opposing camps, implying that the truth lies somewhere between these two extremes. The market might be efficient in the short run, as Fama says, but in the long run, human emotion can create colossal bubbles, as Shiller says. So, how do these seemingly academic works from the last century connect to our modern world? A world of AI, big data, and global fragmentation. The truth is, the work of these Nobel economics laureates is not just a foundation, it is the blueprint for how the digital economy operates. 1. Kantorowicz's resource allocation in the AI era. Kantorowicz's linear programming system, the tool designed to optimally allocate steel and labor in a Soviet factory, is now the backbone of every modern supply chain and allocation algorithm. Uber, Grab, the algorithm that decides which driver to pair you with, on which route, and how much to charge to maximize company profit and minimize your waiting time, is a giant optimization, resource allocation, problem based on the shadow price theory of Kantorowicz and Koopmans. Amazon's logistics rely on linear programming to determine where to place each item, which route the robot should take, and the most efficient packing method. Connection? Righteous anger. If the algorithm calculates that hiring one more delivery worker has a high shadow price, marginal benefit, than increasing the existing employee's salary, the company's growth will prioritize hiring new people over retaining existing ones. The waste of labor resources and the injustice in income are often unintended consequences of these optimization models. We have handed over the power of optimal resource allocation to algorithms, but who will design the rules of the game for those algorithms?
Milgram and Wilson's work on auction theory doesn't just apply to radio spectrum. It is the invisible mechanism that runs the entire internet economy. Google and Facebook, Meta, every time you search for a keyword or scroll through your newsfeed, a real-time bidding (RTB) auction is taking place. Thousands of advertisers are competing to show their ads to you. The auction algorithm is delicately designed, based on Nobel models, to maximize revenue for the platform while maintaining minimal satisfaction for the user. You are not too annoyed. Connection. Intellectual superiority. When you understand this, you realize that the value of your attention is determined through an auction process far more sophisticated than buying a used car. It is the intellectual satisfaction when you can see through the screen to witness the underlying rules of the game in operation. Akerlof's lemon theory has transformed into the problem of data asymmetric information in the digital age. Personal data. You don't know everything Google or Facebook knows about you. They know the shadow price of your attention and your habits. You do not. This creates a terrifying asymmetry. Connection. Personalized fear. Our personalized fear increases when we realize that we have voluntarily stepped into a giant lemon market where the product, us, is undervalued by the buyer, data companies, because they know more about us than we know about ourselves. Companies don't just use your data to calculate ad charges. They also use the insights of Kahneman and Thaler about human irrationality to design their products and services. Gamification, using psychological mechanisms like fear of missing out, random reward loops to keep you glued to the screen. Auto-renewal subscription models, using Thaler's nudge default setting to make it harder for you to unsubscribe, taking advantage of your inertia. Connection, righteous anger. The biggest resource waste in this era is not rusty steel, but our time and attention being consumed. Nobel insights into irrational behavior have been systematically exploited by corporations, turning our righteous anger into a feeling of being taken advantage of.
We have traveled a long journey, from the cold mathematical models of Kantorovich and Koopmans to the emotional behavioral analyses of Kahneman and Thaler. In summary, these Nobel scientists have tried to answer a single question, repackaged across generations. How do we create a world where waste is eliminated, not just in materials, but in human potential? They show us where waste comes from the lack of knowledge about the shadow price of resources, Kantorovich and Koopmans. They point out how to design honesty by creating perfect rules of the game, mechanism designed by Hurwitz and Milgram. They reveal why dishonesty exists because of asymmetric information and irrational behavior, Akerlof and Kahneman. As we conclude, we must confront a fact filled with fatalism. A perfect system does not exist. Waste is a constant. Even if Fama believes in the efficient market, Schiller has proven that bubbles still happen. Even if Kantorovich can calculate the optimum, humans will still waste due to psychological biases. But this is also where courage is found. The greatest contribution of the Nobel economists is not that they found an absolute formula, but that they gave us the tools to see that waste and irrationality clearly. When you understand prospect theory, you can fight against the fear of loss that is keeping you in a bad job or holding a plummeting stock. When you understand shadow prices, you can look through the inflation of market prices and see the true value. When you understand mechanism design, you can become a better market participant, not just a pawn in a game. The warning and philosophy. Our world is being optimized by algorithms based on these theories. But there is one thing no linear programming formula can optimize: the shadow price of a human soul, of fairness, and of a life not dictated by fear and greed. Your mission after reading these stories is not to become an economist. Your mission is to become a responsible consumer of information and a conscious market participant. Use these Nobel economist stories as an awakening to demand efficiency, honesty, and optimization, not just for your wallet, but for your soul. Because the greatest waste is not money, but the potential we never achieve.